The courthouse steps were slick with black ice that January morning, salt crunching under my boots like broken glass. Inside, the radiator hissed against limestone walls while wet wool coats dripped in the gallery. The smell of old paper and lemon polish hung thick in the air, mixed with bitter coffee someone had left on the clerk's desk. Diane sat at the plaintiff's table in black cashmere, her Mont Blanc pen, the one her father gave her, poised over documents like a weapon. Mitchell, her city lawyer, spread papers across the table like poker cards, smirking at me the way a man does when he knows he's already won. Judge Pruitt entered. I stood. Mitchell didn't. Diane leaned toward the microphone, voice smooth as frosted glass. Your Honor, this is simple. The prenup is ironclad. Warren signed away rights to all assets acquired during marriage, including the farmstead. My jaw tightened. The gallery murmured. Mitchell added, almost bored, he'll never touch her money again, or her land. I stood, kept my voice low. Judge, I'd like to request a 2-week continuance. Diane's eyebrow arched. Mitchell laughed. Actually laughed. Judge Pruitt looked at me over his reading glasses. On what grounds, Mr. Cassidy? I need to check something in the basement. Corinne, the court clerk, slid a sticky note under my case file. I didn't look down. Judge Pruitt studied me for a long moment. The radiator hissed. Someone in the gallery coughed. 2 weeks, he said finally. We'll reconvene February 8th, 9 a.m. Mitchell stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Your Honor, with respect, my client has business obligations that— 2 weeks, counselor. The judge's gavel cracked once. And next time, stand when I enter my courtroom. Mitchell's face went red. I didn't wait to watch. I picked up my folder, kept my eyes forward, and walked out. Diane's whisper followed me to the door. What's he up to? The cold hit me like a fist when I stepped outside. I walked to my truck, climbed in, sat there with the engine off. My hands shook, not from cold, from something else. Rage, maybe, or relief that I hadn't folded right there in front of everyone. I unfolded Corinne's note against the steering wheel. County records, 1880 to 1960, basement room 4. Archives open till 4 p.m. The paper smelled faintly of her hand lotion, something floral I couldn't name. I folded it carefully, tucked it in my shirt pocket, started the engine. The roads were empty. Most folks stayed home when the wind cut like this. I didn't go home. It wasn't really mine anymore anyway, not the way Diane's lawyers had carved it up on paper. Instead, I drove to the crossroads, to the squat cinder block building with the hand-painted sign, Brennan's Bait and Tackle. Lyle's truck sat out front, crusted with road salt. The door chime jangled when I pushed inside. Warm air hit me, thick with the smell of coffee and worm dirt and diesel exhaust from the heater rattling in the corner. Lyle stood behind the counter, pouring coffee into 2 foam cups like he'd been expecting me. You folding? He asked, sliding 1 cup across. I wrapped my hands around it, felt the heat seep into my knuckles. Not yet. He nodded once, set his cup down, disappeared into the back room. I heard him moving things, the scrape of metal on concrete. When he came back, he was carrying his old surveyor's transit level, 50 pounds of brass and precision, scratched from 40 years of use. He set it on the counter between us without a word. I stared at it. The last time I'd seen that instrument, Lyle and I were 25, helping my grandfather survey the back 40 after a boundary dispute with the Hendersons. Granddad had taught us both how to use it, how to set up the tripod on solid ground, how to sight through the scope, how to trust the math even when your eyes wanted to lie. Your granddad taught me how to use this, Lyle said quietly. He took a sip of coffee, watching me over the rim. Let's see if the land remembers what she forgot. Outside, the wind howled. The shop's tin roof creaked. Somewhere in the back, a radio played low. Farm report, talking about corn futures. I reached out, ran my fingers over the brass. It was cold, solid, real in a way nothing in that courtroom had been. She's got city lawyers, I said. Money. Time. She's got all that, Lyle agreed. He set his cup down. But you've got something she doesn't. What's that? You know where the property lines are. He tapped the transit level. And so does this. I looked at him, really looked at him. 72 years old, face like worn leather, hands that still held steady. We'd been friends since grade school. He'd been best man at my wedding, back when Diane still laughed at my jokes, back before she built her empire and decided I was just part of the foundation she didn't need anymore. Why are you helping me? I asked. He picked up his cup again, drained it. Because brothers don't let brothers, lose their land. And because I'm retired, bored, and I've been wanting to use this thing one more time before I die. That got a sound out of me. Not quite a laugh, but close. Besides, he added, eyes serious now, I saw what she did to you in there. Saw how Mitchell looked at you, like you were nothing. He shook his head. You're not nothing, Warren, and it's about time someone reminded her of that. The wind rattled the windows, the heater coughed diesel smoke. I finished my coffee, set the cup down, looked at the transit level. Tomorrow morning? I asked. Dawn, Lyle said. Bring your grandfather's chain if you still have it. We're going to do this right. I nodded, turned toward the door. My hand was on the handle when Lyle spoke again. Warren, what's in the basement? What did Corinne tell you? I looked back at him. I'll know tomorrow afternoon, I said, after I find out what Diane's lawyers didn't. The courthouse basement smelled like a tomb, mildew and dust and decades of forgotten paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in cold blue. My boots echoed on concrete as I followed the hand-painted signs to room 4. Corinne had left the door unlocked. The records room was smaller than I expected. Walls lined floor to ceiling with metal shelves holding leather-bound ledgers and file boxes labeled by decade. A single wooden table sat in the center, scarred and water-stained. One window, high up, let in weak gray light. I started with the 1950s. Pulled down ledgers, cracked them open carefully. The spines were brittle, pages yellowed and fragile. The handwriting was old-fashioned, careful, done with fountain pens that had bled slightly into the paper. County Recorder, 1952. Property transfers. I ran my finger down the index until I found it. Cassidy, Franklin Sr. to Cassidy, Franklin Jr. My grandfather to my father. I turned to the page. There it was, the deed transfer, dated June 14, 1952. The farmstead, all 40 acres, transferred into trust. I read the fine print twice, 3 times, making sure I understood what I was seeing. Held in perpetual family trust, transferable only to direct male descendants. My hands shook as I photocopied the page. The machine whirred, spat out the copy, and I held it up to the light. Clear, legible, legal. I looked up to find Corinne standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything, just watched me with those quiet eyes that had seen 50 years of courthouse drama. Then she turned and disappeared down the hall, her footsteps fading. I made 3 copies, folded them carefully, put the ledger back exactly where I'd found it. When I walked out into the late afternoon cold, my shirt pocket felt heavier than it should have. Thursday evening, the town hall was packed. I sat in the back row, coat still on, hands in my pockets. The air was thick with body heat and the smell of coffee from the urn someone had set up on a folding table. People I'd known my whole life filled the metal chairs. Eddie Morrison, who farmed the section north of mine. Joanne Fletcher, whose husband had been county prosecutor before he retired. Young families I didn't recognize, probably new to town, curious about the commotion. At the front, Diane stood beside a projection screen in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck. Mitchell hovered near the laptop, queuing up slides. The white screen glowed, waiting. "Thank you all for coming," Diane began, her voice carrying that boardroom confidence I used to find attractive. "I know there have been questions about my plans for the Cassidy property, and I wanted to address them directly." She clicked a remote. The first slide appeared, a sleek rendering of glass buildings, solar panels, manicured lawns, Agritech Innovation Campus in bold letters across the top. "This 40-acre site will become a cutting-edge research facility," she continued. "We'll be developing next-generation farming technology, AI-driven crop management, sustainable irrigation systems, precision agriculture tools that will revolutionize how America feeds itself." Another slide. Blueprints, timelines, projected job numbers. Eddie Morrison stood up, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "That's Cassidy land," he said, voice rough. "Been Cassidy land since 1912. Diane's smile didn't waver. "It was Cassidy land, Eddie. As of last month, it's my land. The prenup is very clear on marital property rights." "Marital property?" Joanne stood now, too, arms crossed. "Warren's family homesteaded that ground. His grandfather built that workshop with his own hands." "And it's been well maintained," Diane said smoothly. "Which is why it's perfect for our purposes. We'll be breaking ground June 1st. Construction should take 18 months. We're estimating 30 permanent jobs once the facility is operational." More murmurs. Some approving, jobs were jobs. Others angry, confused. I sat perfectly still, watching her work the room. She was good at this, always had been. She could make anything sound reasonable, necessary, inevitable. There will be community benefits, she went on. Educational partnerships with the high school, internship programs, a public park along the south boundary. Another slide. Artists' renderings of smiling people in lab coats, happy families picnicking. This is about progress, about bringing cutting-edge technology to rural America. About erasing him. Eddie pointed at me. That's what this is about. The room went quiet. Heads turned. Diane's eyes found mine across the crowded space. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. I saw a calculation there, the same look she used to get during negotiations, figuring angles and leverage and how to win. Then she smiled. Not the boardroom smile, but something colder, sharper. Warren, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, you're welcome to attend the groundbreaking, June 1st. Consider it an invitation. Her eyes held mine. The message was clear. I'm moving fast, and there's nothing you can do about it. I stood slowly, buttoned my coat, walked toward the door. The crowd parted. No one spoke. Outside, the wind had picked up. Snow was starting to fall, small hard flakes that stung my face. June 1st. She'd given me a deadline without realizing what she'd just handed me. Saturday morning, the diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. The kind of place where the waitress knew your order before you sat down, where the booths had duct tape over the vinyl cracks, where farmers gathered after morning chores to solve the world's problems over eggs and toast. I slid into the corner booth. Before I could say anything, Eddie Morrison appeared with a tray, breakfast plates for 4, steam rising. Joanne Fletcher followed, then her husband Carl, the retired prosecutor, moving slow with his cane. We ordered for you, Eddie said, settling his bulk across from me. Figured you could use the company. The eggs were runny, the way I liked them. The coffee was terrible, the way it always was. I ate because my hands needed something to do. Town hall was something, Carl said carefully. He had that lawyer way of speaking, measured and deliberate. She's moving fast. June, I said. Question is, Eddie stabbed at his hash browns, what are you moving? I set my fork down, pulled the folded photocopy from my jacket, slid it across the scarred tabletop. Carl put on his reading glasses, studied it. His eyebrows climbed. He passed it to Joanne, who read it twice, then looked at me. Warren, this is my grandfather's deed, I finished. Transferred to my father in 1952, held in perpetual family trust, never marital property. Mitchell didn't find this? Carl asked. Mitchell didn't look past 1980, apparently. Maybe figured digital records were enough. Eddie grinned, showing the gap in his front teeth. City lawyers. I'll testify, he said. I remember your granddad. Knew that land before you were born. Hell, I helped your dad fix the fence line in '73. My husband knows every judge in 3 counties, Joanne added. Judge Pruitt's solid, fair, he'll listen. Carl nodded slowly, tapping the paper. This changes things. But Warren, you need to be prepared. They'll fight this. Mitchell will argue marital property statutes, claim the trust was dissolved, throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. I know. And Diane, Joanne hesitated. She's not going to take this well. The door chimed. We all looked up. A young woman stood there scanning the room, late 20s, carrying a to-go cup from the coffee shop across the street, professional clothes under a winter coat. She made eye contact with me, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, hesitation. She walked over. My table went quiet. Mr. Cassidy, she said, voice low. I'm Sarah. I worked for Mitchell's firm, paralegal. Eddie started to stand, protective, but I put a hand out. Worked? I asked. I quit this morning. She glanced at the other diners, who were suddenly very interested in their eggs. My father, Tom Chen, he had the farm east of yours, 15 years ago. Bank was foreclosing. You testified for him at the hearing, said he'd always been good for his debts, that he just needed time. I remembered. Nice family, 3 kids. The bank gave him 6 months. He got to keep his farm because of you, Sarah said. So I'm going to say something I shouldn't, and then I'm going to leave. And we never had this conversation. I nodded. She leaned closer. Check the property abstract. Line 14, something's off in their filing. The coordinates don't match. She straightened. I'm sorry for what they're doing to you. It's not right. She was gone before I could respond. the door chiming behind her, cold air rushing in. Carl was already reaching for his phone. I can get the property abstract by Monday if there's a discrepancy. Lyle's surveying tomorrow, I said. We'll know by Monday afternoon. Eddie laughed, sudden and loud. Oh, she's going to be pissed. Monday morning, I stood in line at the courthouse clerk's office. The abstract request form was simple. 1 page, property address, fee paid in cash. Corinne took it without comment, disappeared into the back. When she returned, she handed me a thick folder. Our fingers touched briefly on the manila edge. Line 14, she said, barely audible. Just those 2 words. I found an empty bench in the hallway, opened the folder. Legal descriptions, survey coordinates, ownership transfers, technical language that would put most people to sleep. Line 14, storage structure, coordinates 40 dig 42 18 N 85 degree 3107 W. I pulled out my phone, compared them to the deed boundaries Lyle and I had walked yesterday morning, the readings he'd taken with the transit level, the orange spray paint marks on frozen ground. The storage shed, Diane's company shed, the one with the Agritech logo, was 40 feet onto my side of the property line. 40 feet. 2 years she'd had equipment parked on my land. 2 years of trespassing. I looked up at Corinne behind her glass partition. She was filing papers, not looking at me, but her mouth quirked slightly at the corner. Can I get 3 copies of this? I asked. She nodded. That'll be $5. I handed her a 10 through the slot. Keep the change. When I walked out, the sun had broken through the clouds. First time in weeks. The snow on the courthouse lawn sparkled, almost pretty. I called Lyle from my truck. He answered on the first ring. She's been trespassing, I said. 2 years, 40 feet over the line. Silence. Then, Warren, this is evidence. Will it be enough? It's a start, he said. A damn good start. The courtroom felt different the 3rd Wednesday of February. Colder, maybe, or just heavier with expectation. The radiator still hissed, but the sound seemed sharper now, more urgent. I could smell the wood polish stronger than before, mixed with wet leather from Mitchell's briefcase as he unpacked documents with theatrical precision. Judge Pruitt settled into his chair, arranged his papers. Mr. Cassidy, I understand you have new evidence to present. I stood. My lawyer, Carl's former partner doing this pro bono as a favor, nodded at me. I pulled the photocopied deed from my folder, walked it to the bench. Your Honor, this is a property deed dated June 14th, 1952. It shows the farmstead was transferred from my grandfather to my father, held in perpetual family trust. The property was never marital asset subject to the prenup. Mitchell was on his feet before I finished. Your Honor, I must object. This document, assuming it's authentic, predates modern property law. It's legally dubious at best. Judge Pruitt took the deed, studied it through his reading glasses. The courtroom was silent except for the radiator and the sound of pages turning. Counselor, the judge said finally, his voice dry as old paper, a notarized deed recorded in the county ledger is valid in perpetuity in this state. Has been since 1851. You're from Indianapolis, so maybe they do things different up there, but here, a deed is a deed. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Your Honor, we move to dismiss based on marital property statutes. Indiana is an equitable distribution state. Everything acquired during the marriage belongs to both parties, and the property wasn't acquired during the marriage, Counselor. According to this document, it was held in trust long before Mr. and Mrs. Cassidy ever met. I watched Diane's face go pale. She leaned toward Mitchell, whispered something sharp. He straightened his tie, reset. Your Honor, we'll need time to verify this document's authenticity. Chain of custody, handwriting analysis, verification that the trust wasn't dissolved at any point in the intervening 70 years. Motion granted, Judge Pruitt said. I'll rule on this in 1 week. Mr. Cassidy, do you have additional evidence? I glanced at my lawyer. He nodded slightly. Working on it, Your Honor. See that you do. The gavel cracked. 1 week, gentlemen, February 22nd. Outside, the sun was too bright against the snow. I squinted, pulled my cap lower, headed for my truck. Warren. Diane's voice stopped me at the curb. I turned. She stood on the courthouse steps in her long black coat, arms crossed against the cold. Mitchell was getting into a town car, phone already pressed to his ear. She'd sent him away so we could talk alone. What are you doing? She asked. Fighting for my land. It's not your land. It hasn't been for years. She came down 2 steps, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold. The prenup was clear, you signed it. I signed away rights to assets acquired during the marriage. The farmstead wasn't acquired, it was inherited. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're clever? You think one old deed changes anything? We'll find out next week. She laughed, short, brittle. You can't win this, Warren. You know that, right? I have resources. I have lawyers who can tie this up in appeals for years. I have money, I finished. You have money. I know. You've made that very clear. Then why are you doing this? Pride? Some pathetic attempt to prove you're not just the man who married up and couldn't keep up? The words hung there in the cold air between us. I'd heard them before, different versions, whispered at parties when she thought I wasn't listening, implied in every conversation with her business colleagues who looked at me like I was furniture. I'm doing this, I said quietly, because it's my land, my grandfather's land, my father's land, and it's not for sale. Everything's for sale. She pulled her coat tighter. I'm building something here, Warren, something that matters. Something bigger than your nostalgia for a workshop and 40 acres of corn stubble. Then build it somewhere else. I don't want somewhere else. I want... She stopped herself. You want to erase me, I said. That's what this is really about. Build your campus where my family lived for 100 years, pave over every trace, prove you never needed me to begin with. She didn't deny it. See you next week, I said, and climbed into my truck. Friday morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. 7 missed calls, Lyle's name on the screen. I called him back. Anissa Warren, you need to see the paper. What paper? Just get to the shop, now. The roads were clear, melting snow running in rivulets along the ditches. 20 minutes later, I pushed through the door of Brennan's Bait and Tackle. Lyle had the local weekly spread on the counter, coffee going cold beside it. The headline was big, bold. Cassidy divorce battle, heats up, CEO plans campus, husband claims old deed. I picked it up, scanned the article. They'd gotten quotes from the town hall meeting, from courthouse sources, from Mitchell. Mr. Cassidy is grasping at straws. This is a transparent attempt to delay the inevitable. Mrs. Cassidy has been more than generous in settlement discussions, and we're confident the court will see through this desperate maneuver. There was a photo of me from the hearing, looking old and tired, and exactly like a man grasping at straws. My phone started ringing. I looked at the screen. Reporter. I declined. It rang again, different number. Another reporter. I turned the phone off, set it face down on the counter. They're making you look desperate, Lyle said quietly. Maybe I am. You're not. He pushed his coffee away. Mitchell's running a PR campaign because he's worried about that deed. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be talking to papers. The shop phone rang. Lyle unplugged it from the wall. We sat there in silence, listening to the diesel heater rattle, the wind push against the windows. Outside, the sky was gray again, more snow coming. I've been thinking about it all wrong, I said finally. What do you mean? I've been fighting her, her money, her lawyers, her timeline. I tapped the newspaper. But that's not the fight. Then what is? I looked at him. The land. That's the fight. She can have all the money in the world, all the lawyers, all the headlines. But if the land says it's mine, if the deeds and the surveys and the records say it's mine, I stopped. Then it doesn't matter what Mitchell tells the papers. Lyle was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, went to the back room, came back with his survey equipment, the transit level, the measuring tape, the notebook where he'd been recording readings. I finished the survey Tuesday, he said. Was waiting to tell you in person. That storage shed they built? 40 feet onto your property, maybe more. I've got photographs, measurements, GPS coordinates. That's trespassing. That's evidence. He set the notebook in front of me. Question is, what do we do with it? My phone buzzed on the counter, even though it was off. Phantom vibration, my nerves playing tricks, or maybe reporters were starting to show up. We give them something to write about, I said. We're filing an addendum, survey evidence of property encroachment. We're not just defending, we're going on offense. Lyle smiled slow as, now you're thinking. The shop door chimed. We both tensed. It was Sarah, the paralegal, coat soaked from the snow that had started falling. She looked at us, then at the newspaper on the counter. I saw the article, she said. I wanted to make sure you knew. Mitchell's already drafting a countersuit. He's going to claim Lyle trespassed during the survey, that any evidence gathered is inadmissible. Of course he is, Lyle muttered. But there's something else. Sarah pulled a folder from under her coat, protected from the wet. Before I quit, I made copies. Timeline of the Agritech property acquisition plans. Internal memos. They've been planning this for 18 months, since before Diane even filed for divorce. She set the folder on the counter. She told Mitchell to finish this before fiscal year ends. April 30th. She needs board approval for the campus funding by then, and she can't get it if there's an ongoing property dispute. I opened the folder. Emails, memos, architectural proposals, all dated months before I'd even known the marriage was ending. She's on a deadline, I said slowly. And you're not, Sarah confirmed. Every day this drags out costs her money, credibility, board confidence. Lyle was grinning now. She thinks she's hunting you, but she just gave you the high ground. Sarah pulled her coat tighter. I should go. I've already said too much. Why are you helping me? I asked. Same question I'd asked Lyle. Because my dad taught me loyalty matters more than a paycheck, she said. And because what they're doing to you is wrong. She left the way she came, quick and quiet. I looked down at the folder, at the newspaper, at Lyle's survey notebook. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, covering everything in white. Warren, Lyle said, they might make you look desperate in the papers, but desperate men don't have deadlines. She does. I nodded slowly. Then let's make her miss it. Sunday morning came quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when the world holds its breath before deciding what comes next. I woke before dawn, out of habit, made coffee in the workshop because the main house felt too empty, too much like admitting Diane had already won. The workshop smelled like it always had, kerosene and old motor oil, sawdust and steel. My tools hung on the pegboard where they'd hung for 40 years, each one outlined in black marker so I'd know where it belonged. My father had done that, said a man who couldn't find his tools was a man who'd lost his way. I pulled down the tools one by one, started with the socket wrenches, cleaned each one with a kerosene-soaked rag, working the cloth into the grooves. The rag was soft from years of use, stained permanent black. My hands moved automatic, muscle memory taking over while my mind worked on other things. The radio on the shelf played low, same station my grandfather used to listen to, farm reports and old country songs and preacher shows on Sunday morning. The preacher was talking about patience, about faith, about trusting the process, even when you couldn't see the end. I moved to the torque wrenches, checking each calibration, wiping away dust. These were precision instruments, same as Lyle's transit level. They didn't lie. You set them to 30 foot-pounds, they gave you 30 foot-pounds. Honest in a way people rarely were. Behind the pegboard, hanging from a single nail, was my grandfather's surveying chain. 20 feet of steel links, each one 12 inches exact, the brass handles tarnished green with age. I'd found it in the barn loft after he died, cleaned it up, meant to give it to a museum or something. Never did. I took it down now, laid it across the workbench. The links were stiff, rusted in places. I worked oil into each joint, patient, taking my time. The metal was cold under my fingers, rough with corrosion, but solid. Still good. Sunlight was starting to come through the dusty window, weak but there. February sun, winter sun, the kind that promised spring even though spring was still weeks away. I hung the chain on the pegboard next to the empty space where Lyle's transit level used to sit. The outline was there in black marker. He'd borrowed it Tuesday for the survey, hadn't brought it back yet, would probably keep it until this whole thing was done. The radio announcer came on, switching from the sermon to news. I half listened while I cleaned my grandfather's old pipe wrench, the one with his initials scratched into the handle. Then I heard my name. Local property dispute has drawn attention to questions of agricultural preservation versus economic development. Diane Cassidy, CEO of Agritech Solutions, maintains that her innovation campus will bring jobs and technology to rural Indiana, while critics argue. I turned it off. My hands were shaking again. I set the wrench down, gripped with the edge of the workbench, breathed deep. The workshop smelled like home, like my father teaching me to change oil when I was 10, like my grandfather explaining why you always clean your tools before you put them away, because the work's not done until it's done right, and right means ready for next time. Granddad, I said to the empty room, I don't know if I can do this. She's got lawyers, money, time. What if I lose? What if I'm just a stubborn old man holding on to dirt? The wind pushed against the walls. A loose board creaked. Outside, I heard a crow calling. I picked up the surveying chain, felt its weight in my hands, remembered my grandfather's voice. Son, the land doesn't care who's stronger, it cares who's right. I hung the chain back on its nail, stepped back, looked at my clean tools in their proper places, everything ready, everything in order. Then I locked the workshop, got in my truck, drove to town. Monday afternoon, the courthouse was busy. Tax season, people filing returns, waiting in line at the treasurer's office. I took the stairs down to the basement, found room 4, knocked. Corinne opened the door. Mr. Cassidy? I need to file an addendum to my case. Survey evidence. She took the folder I handed her, the one Lyle had prepared. Photographs, measurements, GPS coordinates, the survey plat showing exactly where Diane's storage shed sat on my land. She time-stamped it, dated it, logged it into the system. Her hands moved efficient, practiced. Judge Pruitt will see this before the hearing? I asked. He'll see it tonight, she said quietly. I'm taking the day's filings to his office at 5. I nodded, turned to go. Mr. Cassidy, she hesitated. My grandfather worked for yours, on the farmstead back in the 40s, before the war. Your grandfather gave him work when nobody else would because he was German and people were, she stopped. What I mean is, some debts get passed down, same as land. She closed the door before I could respond. I drove back through town, past the diner, where Eddie and Joanne were probably having coffee, past the high school where I'd met Diane at a fundraiser 30 years ago, past the bank that held the mortgage I'd paid off 5 years early with overtime and side jobs and scrimping. The farmstead looked different in the late afternoon light. The snow was melting in patches, brown earth showing through. The workshop sat solid, metal roof rusting but sound. Beyond it, the 40 acres stretched out. Empty now, winter bare, but mine. Or it had been, or it would be again. I parked by the workshop, got out, stood there in the cold. From here, I could just see the corner of Diane's storage shed, white metal with the Agritech logo in green, sitting 40 feet over the property line where my grandfather's old hay barn used to stand. She'd built on top of him without even knowing. My phone rang. Lyle. Warren, Mitchell just called. He's filing a countersuit for survey trespass, claims I violated property access laws. Can he do that? He can file. Won't hold up, survey access is protected for boundary disputes. But it'll tie things up, make noise. A pause. You worried? I looked at the shed, at my land, at the workshop where 3 generations had worked. No, I said. Let him file. Let him make all the noise he wants. That's what I like to hear. I could hear the smile in Lyle's voice. Judge Pruitt's chambers called. Hearing's still on for Wednesday, 9 a.m. sharp. We'll be ready. I hung up, stood there a moment longer. The sun was setting, the sky going pink and orange behind gray clouds. A robin landed on the fence post, too early for robins, but there it was anyway, red breast bright against the snow. Spring was coming. The land knew it, even if we didn't yet. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 6. I was already awake, had been, for an hour, sitting in the workshop with coffee going cold in my hands. Diane's name on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Warren. Her voice was different, tired, maybe, or just done with pretending. We need to talk, before court. We can talk through the lawyers, please. The word came hard, like she wasn't used to saying it. Just give me 5 minutes. I looked at the clock. 2 hours before the hearing. Where? I'm outside. I went to the window. Her car sat in my driveway, engine running, exhaust white in the cold air. I hung up, pulled on my coat, walked out. The ground was mud and melting snow, my boots sinking with each step. I could smell thaw in the air, earth and rot and water, the smell of winter giving up. I got in the passenger side. The car was warm, leather seats, that new car smell mixed with her perfume. Classical music played low on the stereo. She didn't look at me, just stared through the windshield at the workshop. I'm willing to settle, she said. $200,000. You walk away. No more court dates, no more lawyers, no more of this. This being? You fighting me on something you can't win. I let that sit there between us. Outside, a crow landed on the fence, cawed once, flew away. That's a lot of money, I said finally. It is. She turned to face me now. More than this land is worth, honestly. But I want this done. The board is asking questions, investors are nervous, and every day this drags on costs me... She stopped. It costs me. Credibility, I said. That's what it costs. The CEO who can't even handle her own divorce. Her jaw tightened. Is that what you want? To hurt me? I want my land. It's not your land, Warren. Legally, morally, in any way that matters. It's mine. You signed a prenup, you agreed, and now you're hiding behind some dusty old deed because your pride can't handle that. I became something and you didn't. I finished. Is that what you were going to say? She looked away. You were a good husband. For a long time you were. But I grew, I built something, and you wanted to stay here, in this workshop, cleaning tools and pretending the world wasn't changing. The world changes, I agreed. Land doesn't. Family doesn't. Or it shouldn't. Family, she laughed, bitter. You want to talk about family? Your grandfather would have taken this deal. He was a practical man. He would have seen $200,000 and understood that's how you win, by knowing when to fold. You didn't know my grandfather. I know he wouldn't have thrown away a fortune over sentiment. I opened the door, cold air rushing in, put one boot on the muddy ground. Warren, wait. See you in court, Diane. When you lose, she said, voice hard again. When Mitchell tears that deed apart and Judge Pruitt rules in my favor and you're evicted in June, don't say I didn't offer. Don't say I wasn't fair. I got out, closed the door, gently, watched her car spin wheels in the mud before finding traction, driving away too fast. Lyle's truck pulled in 5 minutes later. He got out carrying 2 thermoses and a folder thick with papers. Was that Diane? Settlement offer, $200,000. He stopped, looked at me. That's a lot of money, I know. I took one of the thermoses, cracked it open. Coffee, hot and black. She said I should take it. What did you say? I said no. He grinned. Good, because I've got something she's going to hate. We went into the workshop. He spread papers across my workbench. The survey plat, photographs of the property line, GPS coordinates, and something new, a document with an official seal. County Clerk's Office, 1987, he said. Right-of-way agreement for the access road, signed by your father and the county. Know what it says? I leaned closer, reading. Any structure built within 50 feet of the county easement requires explicit county approval, Lyle continued. That storage shed? 42 feet from the easement, no approval on file. So it's not just trespassing. It's an illegal structure. County code violation, which means even if she somehow wins the property dispute, she still has to tear down the shed. He tapped the document. Sarah found this Friday, called me yesterday, said she figured we could use it. I stared at the papers, at the photographs, at the evidence stacking up like firewood. Lyle, why is Sarah helping? She doesn't even know me. She knows what's right, he said simply. Some people still do. The clock on the wall ticked toward 8, 1 hour. She's scared, I said. Diane, I could hear it. The settlement offer, the deadline. She's scared she's going to lose. Then let's make sure she does. We loaded everything into Lyle's truck, the survey equipment, the documents, the photographs. He drove. I sat passenger, watching the farmland roll past. Fields still brown, but the snow was gone now, water standing in low spots, reflecting gray sky. Warren, Lyle said, as we pulled into the courthouse lot, whatever happens in there, you fought. That matters. Does it? Your grandfather would say it does. Your father would say it does. He put the truck in park. And I'm saying it does. Mitchell's town car was already there, and Diane's sedan, and reporters with cameras waiting on the steps. I got out, straightened my coat, picked up the folder of evidence. The courthouse doors opened. Judge Pruitt's clerk, Corinne, stood there, holding the door. Behind me, Lyle was lifting his transit level from the truck bed, carrying it like it weighed nothing at all. Let's go remind them, I said, what the land remembers. The hearing went longer than anyone expected. 4 hours of testimony, documents, objections. Mitchell fought every piece of evidence, the deed, the survey, the right-of-way agreement. He was good at his job, I'd give him that. Made everything sound questionable, suspicious, convenient. Judge Pruitt listened, made notes, asked careful questions. When he finally called recess at 1 o'clock, he looked tired. I'll review the materials, he said. We'll reconvene Monday for my ruling. 5 more days. I walked out into weak sunlight. The reporters swarmed, shouting questions. I kept my head down, kept walking. Lyle ran interference, his bulk clearing a path to the truck. We didn't talk on the drive back. What was there to say? We'd presented everything we had. Now it was up to a judge who'd been on the bench for 30 years, who knew every trick, every angle, who wouldn't be swayed by sentiment or sympathy. Lyle dropped me at the farmstead. squeezed my shoulder once, drove away. I stood in the driveway, looking at the workshop, at the land, at the shed with Diane's logo gleaming in the afternoon sun. Then I got in my truck and drove to the cemetery. The grave was simple, gray granite, plain letters, Franklin Cassidy Sr., 1901, 1978, hard work, fair dealing, family. Someone had left flowers on the adjacent plot, fresh ones, daisies in a mason jar. I didn't know who, some stranger tending their own dead, keeping up appearance, even when no one was watching. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, listening to the wind move through the bare trees. The cemetery was old, established in 1880, half the names on the stones forgotten. Families moved away or died out, leaving only granite markers and maybe a few mentions in county histories nobody read. "Granddad," I said finally, voice rough in the quiet, "I don't know if I can do this." A cardinal called from somewhere, bright sound in the gray afternoon. "She's got lawyers, money, time." Mitchell made everything sound like I'm making it up, like the deed is fake, like Lyle trespassed, like I'm just a bitter old man who can't accept that he lost. I kicked at a clump of frozen dirt. What if he's right? What if I lose? What if I'm just stubborn, holding on to dirt that doesn't matter to anyone but me? The wind picked up, rattling the branches. I pulled my collar tighter. The town thinks I'm desperate. The papers make me look pathetic. Even Diane thinks. I stopped. She offered me money, a lot of money, enough to start over somewhere else, buy a little place, live quiet. And I said no. Was that stupid? Was that pride? Silence. Just wind and distant traffic on the county road. I crouched down, touched the stone, cold under my fingers, rough with age and weather. The letters were sharp still, clear after almost 50 years, granite lass. "You used to tell me the land doesn't forget," I said quietly. "But what if people do? What if in 50 years, nobody remembers the Cassidy farmstead, nobody cares that your grandfather homesteaded it in 1912, that you raised your family there, that Dad—" My throat tightened. I stopped. Dad had died in that workshop. In that heart attack, 71 years old, socket wrench still in his hand. I'd found him slumped over the workbench, tools spread out, radio playing, gone doing what he loved. "What if I'm the last one who cares?" I asked the stone. The cardinal called again. I looked up, searching the trees, but couldn't spot it. Then I noticed the flowers again on the adjacent grave. Fresh flowers, changed weekly probably, for someone who'd been dead 20 years according to the stone. Someone still cared. Someone still remembered. I straightened slowly, joints creaking. "The land doesn't care who's stronger," I said, repeating his words from memory. "It cares who's right." The wind gentled, clouds broke, letting through weak sun that caught on the granite, making it almost glow. I stood there another moment, then turned and walked back to my truck. On the drive back, I passed the high school, the diner, the feed store. Small town, ordinary, nothing special. But mine. The place where I'd lived my whole life, where I knew every street, every family, every story. Diane had left this place decades ago, in her mind, if not her body. Left it for board meetings and business conferences and innovation campuses. She'd gotten bigger than this town, too important for it. But I never had, and maybe that wasn't failure. Maybe that was just choice. Monday morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. 7 a.m., Lyle's name on the screen. "Turn on the news," he said, no greeting. "What news?" "Any news. Local, state, doesn't matter. Just turn it on." I grabbed the remote, flipped through channels until I found it. Diane's face, professional photo, beneath a headline that scrolled across the bottom. Agritech CEO faces board questions following property dispute delays. The anchor was talking about missed deadlines, investor concerns, questions about leadership. I turned it up. Sources say the Innovation Campus project, valued at $40 million, has been indefinitely postponed pending resolution of property ownership questions. Board members have called an emergency meeting for Friday to discuss Mrs. Cassidy's future with the company she founded. I turned it off. Sat there, in the quiet workshop, coffee growing cold in my hands. This was it. This was what winning looked like. Before the judge had even ruled. Diane's empire cracking, her board turning on her, her timeline exploding. And I felt nothing, or not nothing exactly. Something hollow. Something that tasted like rust. My phone rang again. Eddie Morrison. "Warren, you see the news? You did it, man. You actually—" "Eddie, I gotta go." I hung up before he could respond, set the phone face down on the workbench. The workshop was quiet, except for the wind outside, the creak of old wood settling. I looked at my tools, clean and ready, hanging in their proper places, looked at my grandfather's surveying chain, looked at the photograph on the wall, me and Diane on our wedding day. 30 years ago, both of us young and stupid and thinking we knew what forever meant. She was smiling in that photo, really smiling. The kind that reached her eyes, the kind she'd stopped doing years ago. I'd wanted justice, wanted the land back, wanted vindication, wanted her to understand that I wasn't nothing, that I mattered. But sitting there, watching her empire collapse on television, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. The clock ticked toward 8. I had an hour before I needed to leave for the courthouse, for Judge Pruitt's final ruling, for whatever came next. I stood, pulled on my coat, walked outside. The sun was up now, warming the mud, pulling steam from the ground. The smell of thaw was stronger, earth and water and growing things waiting underground. March smell, almost spring smell. I walked the property line, following the orange spray paint marks Lyle had left, past the storage shed with Diane's logo, past the spot where my grandfather's barn used to stand, all the way to the back 40. From here, you could see the whole farmstead. 40 acres, flat except for the gentle roll near the creek, good soil, good drainage. My grandfather had chosen well. 3 generations of Cassidy men had worked this ground. And if I won today, it would end with me. No kids, no heirs. Just an old man in a workshop, holding on to something that would die when he did. Maybe Diane was right. Maybe $200,000. And a clean exit was the smart play. Maybe sentiment was just another word for foolish. A truck turned into the driveway. Lyle's. He got out, walked over, stood beside me looking at the land. "News says she's in trouble," he said. I saw. "You don't look happy about it." "I'm not trying to destroy her, Lyle. I just wanted—" I stopped. I don't know what I wanted anymore. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You wanted what was yours. That's not wrong. Isn't it? Look what it's cost. Her company, her reputation, my marriage. Your marriage was over before you walked into that courtroom. You know that?" I did know that. Had known it for years, really, watching her drift further into her world of board meetings and quarterly reports, watching the distance grow until we were strangers sharing an address. "Come on," Lyle said. "Judge Pruitt's waiting. Whatever you're feeling, however this ends, you see it through. That's what your grandfather would say. You see it through." I nodded, followed him back to the truck. In the passenger seat, I found a folder, new documents I hadn't seen before. "What's this?" Sarah dropped it off this morning. More internal memos. Timeline showing Diane planned the divorce to coincide with the campus project. She was never trying to settle. She was always planning to take everything. I opened the folder, read. Dates, emails, strategy documents. All of it showing calculation, planning, intent. She'd been 3 steps ahead the whole time. Or she thought she had been. "You still want to walk away?" Lyle asked, starting the engine. I closed the folder, set it on my lap. "No," I said. "Let's finish this." The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the back wall. I recognized faces. Eddie, Joanne, Carl, farmers I'd known 40 years, townspeople who'd followed the story in the papers. Sarah sat in the 3rd row, hands folded in her lap. Diane was already at her table, Mitchell beside her reviewing notes. She looked composed, professional, like this was just another business meeting. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed once against the table before she caught herself and stopped. Judge Pruitt entered. We all stood. This time Mitchell stood too. Lesson learned. "Be seated," the judge said, settling into his chair. He had a stack of documents in front of him, the deed on top. "I've reviewed all submitted materials. Mr. Hargrove, Mrs. Cassidy, Mr. Cassidy, this has been an unusual case. We've covered property law, trust law, marital law, and survey regulations. I've consulted statutes dating back to 1851. I've examined deeds, photographs, and county records." He paused, adjusted his glasses. "Before I rule, I'd like to hear testimony regarding the survey evidence. Mr. Brennan, please take the stand." Lyle stood, walked to the witness box, was sworn in. He moved slow, deliberate, carrying his transit level like it was made of glass. He set it on the rail in front of him, 50 pounds of brass catching the fluorescent light. "Mr. Brennan," Judge Pruitt said, "explain your findings." Lyle cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I conducted a complete boundary survey of the Cassidy property on February 20th and 21st. Using this instrument, he touched the transit level, and GPS coordinates cross-referenced with the 1952 deed and county records, I established the legal property lines. He pulled out the survey plat, unfolded it on the rail. I could see the lines, the measurements, the orange marks. The storage structure bearing the Agritech Solutions logo is located 40 feet and 3 inches onto the Mr. Cassidy's property. It's been there approximately 26 months, based on satellite imagery I subpoenaed from county planning. Mitchell shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Brennan conducted this survey without permission. Any evidence gathered constitutes overruled, Judge Pruitt said, not looking up from the plat. Indiana Code explicitly permits boundary surveys during property disputes. Sit down, counselor. Mitchell sat. His face was red. Furthermore, Lyle continued, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, the structure violates County Code 47-B. Any building within 50 feet of a county easement requires explicit approval. None was filed. I have the right-of-way agreement here signed by Warren's father in 1987. He produced the document. Corinne took it from him, handed it to the judge. Diane was whispering urgently to Mitchell now. He was shaking his head, scribbling notes, looking more desperate by the second. Mr. Brennan, the judge said, still studying the documents, in your professional opinion, having conducted surveys in this county for how long? 43 years, Your Honor. In your professional opinion, is there any question about where the property line falls? No, sir. This instrument doesn't lie. Never has, never will. Mrs. Cassidy's company built on Mr. Cassidy's land. That's trespassing. And they did it without permits. That's a code violation. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. You may step down. Lyle returned to his seat beside me, set the transit level on the floor between us. His hand found my shoulder, squeezed once. Judge Pruitt looked at Mitchell. Counselor, do you wish to cross-examine? Mitchell stood slowly. Your Honor, we maintain that the survey was conducted improperly, that the 1952 deed is counselor. The judge's voice was sharp now, a tone I hadn't heard before. You've been practicing law how long? 15 years, Your Honor. In Indianapolis? Yes, Your Honor. Then let me explain something about how we do things here in Harlan County. He leaned forward. We don't need fancy arguments or corporate lawyers billing $400 an hour. We need facts, deeds, surveys, the kind of evidence that doesn't change based on who's paying for it. He picked up the 1952 deed. This deed is valid. It's been recorded for 73 years. It establishes a family trust that was never dissolved, never challenged, never superseded by marital property law. Mr. Cassidy inherited this land before he ever met your client. Mitchell opened his mouth. The judge held up a hand. I'm not finished. The survey evidence shows clear trespassing and code violations. Your client built on property she doesn't own, without permits she was required to obtain. That's not a gray area, counselor. That's black and white. Diane was pale now, gripping the edge of the table. Your Honor, Mitchell tried again, voice shaking slightly. My client has business obligations, fiscal deadlines. We request immediate judgment to meet Mrs. Cassidy's timeline? Judge Pruitt's eyebrows rose. Counselor, this court doesn't operate on corporate schedules. He set the deed down, folded his hands. Furthermore, I'm invoking Indiana Agricultural Statute 47B. Property disputes involving farmland cannot be finalized until spring ground thaw permits official county survey. Given that we're still experiencing freeze-thaw cycles and given the complexity of this case, I'm ordering a 60-day continuance. Diane stood, chair scraping. Your Honor, that statute is archaic. It hasn't been used in... It's still law, Mrs. Cassidy. We'll reconvene May 10th for final judgment. Until then, the property remains in Mr. Cassidy's possession, and I'm issuing a cease and desist order regarding the storage structure. It will be removed within 30 days. The gavel cracked. Diane stared at the judge, at Mitchell, at me. Her mouth opened, closed. No words came. Mitchell was already packing his briefcase. Movements jerky, rushed. Mrs. Cassidy, we need to file an appeal. I can have the paperwork ready by... Get out, she said quietly. I'm sorry? Get out. You're fired. She walked out of the courtroom, back straight, not looking at anyone. The reporters mobbed her on the courthouse steps. I could hear the shouting through the walls. Judge Pruitt caught my eye. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at me for a moment before gathering his papers and leaving. I sat there, Lyle beside me, the transit level between us. People were congratulating us, shaking our hands, but it felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. "Warren," Lyle said, "we won." "Not yet. 60 days." He invoked the spring thaw clause. He made her miss her deadline. That's winning. I looked at the empty plaintiff's table, at the chair where Diane had sat looking so confident, so sure. "Yeah," I said. "I guess it is." We walked out through the side door to avoid the cameras. My truck was in the back lot, covered in mud from the morning drive. As I unlocked it, my phone buzzed. Text message. "Unknown number. Board voted no confidence. I'm stepping down as CEO. Are you happy now?" I stared at the words, started to type a response, deleted it, started again, deleted it. Finally, I just turned the phone off, climbed in my truck. On the radio, the news was already reporting it. Diane's fall, my victory, the little guy winning against corporate power. I turned that off too. Drove home in silence, listening to the engine, the tires on wet pavement, the sound of spring coming whether we were ready or not. April came soft, the kind of gentle warmth that makes you forget winter ever existed, that makes the cold months feel like a dream you half remember. I was in the workshop, doors open to let spring air flow through, when Sarah called. "Mr. Cassidy, I thought you should know. The board made it official this morning. Diane's out. They're bringing in someone from Chicago to run Agritech." I set down the wrench I'd been cleaning. "How's she doing?" Silence on the line. Then, "I don't know. She's not returning calls. The Innovation Campus project is shelved indefinitely. The storage shed was removed last week. You probably saw." I had seen, watched the crew dismantle it, haul it away in pieces, leaving nothing but crushed grass and 4 concrete pads that would take longer to remove. "Mr. Cassidy, you didn't destroy her. She did that herself." "Maybe." "No, maybe about it. Those memos I found, she'd been planning this for 2 years. The divorce, the campus, everything. She thought she had it all figured out." A pause. She just forgot that some things don't belong on a spreadsheet. After we hung up, I stood in the doorway, watching the land. The fields were greening now, winter wheat coming up, and the trees along the creek were budding. A robin hopped across the driveway, red breast bright against brown earth. Lyle's truck pulled in that afternoon. He got out carrying 2 fishing rods and a tackle box. "Farm pond's warmed up enough," he said. "Figured you could use a break." We walked the back 40 to the pond, water still cold but clear, reflecting blue sky. Set up on the bank with our lines in, not talking much, just being. A base hit Lyle's line around 3. He played it slow, brought it in, held it up. Maybe 2 pounds, scales silver green in the sunlight. "Not bad," I said. "Not bad at all." He released it, watched it swim away. "You hear from her?" "No." "You going to?" I watched my bobber drift. I don't know what I'd say. Could say you're sorry. For what? Fighting for what's mine? For how it ended? Lyle reeled in, cast again. "You wanted justice." "You got it. But that doesn't mean it feels good." The wind moved through new grass, carrying the smell of earth and water and growing things. Somewhere across the pond, a frog called. "My grandfather used to say, 'The land doesn't forget,'" I said finally. "But maybe people should. Maybe holding on to things too long, anger, hurt, pride, maybe that's what kills us in the end." Lyle nodded slowly. "Maybe. But you didn't do this out of anger, Warren. You did it because it was right." "Was it? Look what it cost." "It cost her what she built on lies. That's not on you." He looked at me, eyes serious. "You held up a mirror. She didn't like what she saw. That's different from destroying her." We fished until sunset, caught 3 more bass, released them all. Walked back through fields going gold in the last light, boots muddy, peaceful. May 10th came clear and warm. The final hearing lasted 15 minutes. Judge Pruitt reviewed the spring thaw survey, official county survey that confirmed every measurement Lyle had taken. He reviewed the deed, the trust documents, the timeline. Mitchell didn't appear. Diane sent a different lawyer, younger, cheaper, who stood when the judge entered and said very little. "The property known as the Cassidy Farmstead," Judge Pruitt said, 40 acres, "is hereby confirmed as the sole property of Warren Franklin Cassidy, held in family trust, never subject to marital property division. The storage structure has been removed. The cease and desist order is lifted. This case is closed." The gavel fell one last time. Corinne brought me the deed afterward, the official updated one, stamped and sealed. She smiled, small, quiet, and handed it to me like it was something precious. "Welcome home. Hey, Mr. Cassidy." I drove back to the farmstead alone. Parked by the workshop, sat there for a moment holding the deed. The paper was thick, official, real. Inside the workshop, I hung my grandfather's surveying chain back on its nail, next to the space where Lyle's transit level had hung. The tools were clean, ready, everything in its place. I sat on the workshop step with a thermos of coffee, watching the sun sink behind the fields. The robins were loud now, dozens of them, building nests in the old maple by the house. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, then looked. Diane's number. The message was short. "I'm sorry, for all of it." I read it twice, started to reply, stopped. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. I deleted the message, set the phone aside, watched the light fade over land that had always been mine. Would always be mine, long after both of us were gone. The land doesn't forget, neither would I. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, I was back in the workshop doing what I'd always done, cleaning tools with a kerosene-soaked rag, taking my time, doing it right. The radio played low, same station my grandfather listened to. Farm reports, grain prices, a preacher talking about grace and second chances. Outside, the window was open, warm breeze carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass and turned earth from where I'd tilled the garden plot. I'd planted tomatoes yesterday, first time in 5 years. Put in peppers, too, and green beans along the fence where they could climb. My hands were still dirty, soil under the nails, the good kind of dirty that comes from making things grow. Lyle's truck pulled up around 10. We didn't talk much, just loaded his fishing gear and drove to the pond. The water was warm now, bass jumping at mayflies, turtles sunning on the log by the far bank. We caught 4 fish, kept none, just let them go back to where they belonged. Walking back across the fields, I stopped at the spot where Diane's storage shed had been. The grass was coming back already, green and thick, covering the concrete pads like they'd never been there at all. "Land heals fast," Lyle said, reading my thoughts. "Faster than people." "Maybe, maybe not." He looked at me. "You're healing, I can see it." Maybe I was. The anger had gone quiet anyway, settled into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. She'd wanted everything. I'd wanted what was mine. We'd both gotten what we deserved. The farmstead stretched out around us. 40 acres of good ground, 3 generations deep, mine now in a way it had never quite been before. Some battles you win with noise, some you win with patience, and some you win by just refusing to let go of what matters, even when the whole world says you should. The land doesn't forget, and now neither would she.